Hello everybody and welcome to my video tutorial on distressing armor. Okay, so let's get started. Basically, you got a cereal box for smoothness, and pizza box style cardboard works pretty good. You'll have to have scissors, usually a razor blade, a hot glue gun is important, and the little knife up in the corner. Now you start basically with the underside of the pizza box so you could see what you're doing, what shape you're making, and I'm just going to start by creating the just a breastplate. Now obviously I can't draw this quickly, so a lot of this video is sped up so it doesn't bore you to tears. The other thing with this is when you're cutting, just take your time when you do this. I actually kind of do this pretty quickly and rush through this as I'm just very busy. I do not cut this quickly, but I do cut pretty quickly, and while you're cutting it's a safe thing to go ahead and use gloves so you don't actually cut yourself. Safety is important. You can't finish the product without fingers. So that's basically it. Now what you're going to do is you want to cut, if you could see where the lines are, so you could snap it this way so you could actually give it some shape to it. And so you want to cut pretty much how I cut it along the lines. You don't want to cut against the grain, you want to cut kind of with the grain, so you could shape it. And again, it's just kind of a thing where just use your own intuition on what you're doing. You get the basic overall shape. Now you're basically ready to cut the cereal box cardboard. You want to use this side of the cardboard as it's smooth and not the back side, because the back side is actually a little bit rougher. So we're going to glue the back side of this cardboard onto this breastplate. With the pizza box cardboard. Take the hot glue gun. Hot glue is good. If you can find a better glue that's more suitable for you, go ahead. But basically, squirt it on there, and now you're ready to apply it. And you just apply it pretty quickly, press it down, and it's important at this part, when you press it down, you see how I'm actually bending it. You want to bend it, and you want to give it its shape while the glue's still hot on it, so it will actually kind of keep that shape. Flip it over, and again, you don't want to cut it this quickly, but you go ahead and just start cutting the underside, and you will get your overall shape to your armor that you're kind of looking for. Again, this is just really cheap, how to do it for next to nothing. So, but that's basically what it is, nice and smooth. Pay no attention to the little creepy Lucky Charm guy there. And I'm just kind of just penning in where I'm going to make the slits in it. And that's what I have the razor blade for, as you can see here. Now you want to be very careful while using this, and you want to cut all the way through. Again, it's just something, I rushed this and did this in about an hour and a half. So you want to take your time with this. You don't want to rush through the project at all, because that would kind of suck. So just take your time. As you can see here, I've cut that out. Now what you're going to do with this is you're going to take an additional piece of cardboard, and that you could see down there, you add glue to the underside. Obviously it's kind of a no-brainer, and then you just kind of attach this other piece of cardboard right here to the back side of it, and pretty much get your backing for it, and you could see it's pretty much like that. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use water-based paint, because I'm completely out of paint. Normally the best thing to do would be to spray paint this instead of using water-based paint. You're better off spray painting it, but because I'm just so low on materials right now, I'm just making do with what I have for this video tutorial. So basically I start by giving it a primer coat, and that's literally all the gray paint that I have left right there. I'm going to paint it red. Why red? Because it's the only color I have. And you could see the distressing on it as well. So after the primer dries, you go ahead, slap the red paint on there, and then you're pretty much ready to get started on distressing the armor. And this technique pretty much goes for the rest of the costume as well, except for the dome of the helmet. Now that the red paint is dried, I like to use little tester model paint as well for some of the stuff. I'm just filling in the little things right there with just white paint so you could actually see them. And again, just rushing through this, as this video tutorial could get boring if it drags on. So that's pretty much that. Now what I do is I decide where I want the damage, and I take a little pocket knife and carefully naturally. Make a little scrape there. You can't see it too well. And then I'll make a little scrape there. You can't see it too well on here where the scrapes are. And then I'll make one there. And what I can do now is I could go ahead and start digging into it. And the beauty of this is, the reason I don't cut through the actual cardboard armor plates is because what I'm doing is I'm actually cutting through the top layer of the cereal box. And if you could see there, that's actually the pizza box underneath that's kind of coming through. And you're just going to have to judge it yourself on how much pressure you put onto it, on how deep you go. And with this, it's just making scrapes until you start peeling stuff off of it. And that's pretty much it. Now, when you work with plastic to do something like this, it's a slightly different technique, but it involves a heating gun, and it's a little bit more intricate. But I'll go ahead and do a VT for that shortly. But yeah, this is basically it. You just kind of got to work at your own pace and at your own rhythm. You got to just kind of use your own judgment when you do this to your own armor, if you do this to your own armor. And if there's any kids out there who are doing this, I highly recommend that you obviously do it with a parent around. But this is a great, extremely inexpensive way to make some pretty cool armor. And again, you could see all the brush strokes on this simply because I use water-based paint and brushed it on instead of sprayed the initial paint coat on. So I suggest using spray paint. Now what I did is I got a bucket of acrylic flat black paint, water-based, a cup of water, and some toilet tissue. What I like to do is just pretty much paint the whole armor, and this is how I start to distress it. You do this, you dip the, I like to use toilet tissue just because it's soft, and I like that consistency, and I've grown accustomed to using it. So you take a piece of toilet tissue, dip it in your water, and you just kind of wipe it away gently. The more pressure you put on, the more water you put on, it's going to give you different effects. So this is actually kind of a cool little technique where you can make just a simple little armor plate and just start distressing on your own. So before you actually get to distressing an expensive costume, you could kind of have practice on doing it to the costume. That cost you maybe $2 at the most, or the piece of armor that was free. Again, just painting the whole thing black, and you have to rush at this part to get that water onto the Kleenex or the toilet tissue, because if you don't, the problem that you're going to have, what's going to happen is the paint will dry, and once it dries, you're kind of screwed on that. So you know, again, with this, it just depends on how much pressure you want to put onto it and how much you're going to be taking off. And you know, certain areas you see certain streaks, that's because I was able to just brush it off in certain areas. And what I do now is I go over the distressing with silver. The reason I did it black first is because it just adds multiple layers, kind of like a special effects shot. And now this is just pretty much a quick time lapse of me quickly distressing the armor, just adding little paint chips with a paintbrush. One thing that works really good is in special effects makeup, they use a stipple sponge. And a stipple sponge, you dip that in some silver and actually gives you really neat paint streaks. One thing I do here is I naturally go after all the edges, because that's most likely where the paint's going to chip off first. I don't like undercoating it silver and then chipping away. I like doing it on top for a little bit of a better effect. But that's up to you. That's just a simple tester silver model paint. Now, one thing I do, you gotta let that dry, of course. Now, once that's dried, you could come back with the black paint and go over the silver in the distressing, and that's going to give it detail. Again, take your wet cloth or tissue and just kind of wash it away a little bit, add a little bit more black around the edges. You see what I'm doing there at the bottom. And you could just kind of scrape it down, and over here just kind of scrape it down to give it that dripping aging effect to it. This is actually kind of like very similar to the technique that they use in Hollywood to do a lot of stuff like this. Now this is just about finished. The only other thing that there is left to do is do a very slight touch up with silver one last time. You take the silver, I should have waited for the black to dry, and then you just take the silver and basically just touch it up here and there just like that to give it a top coating, and what you're left with is an end result that has pretty photorealistic distressing to it. So I hope you enjoyed this really fast video tutorial, and I will do one on working with plastic very soon. Bye.